Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into Chapter 4 of We Agnostics, which tackles, I think, a pretty intriguing idea.
Right.
Finding a power greater than yourself as a way to overcome alcoholism.
Yeah.
Now, I know that might sound a bit out there.
Right.
Especially for those of you who, like the chapter title suggests, identify as agnostic or atheist.
Yeah, well, what's fascinating is that the chapter really leans into that skepticism.
Oh, interesting.
It starts by acknowledging the very real struggle that many alcoholics face, this feeling of utter powerlessness.
Right.
Despite a desperate desire to change.
It's like you're stuck in this loop.
Yeah.
Where you know you need to change, but you're completely incapable.
You just can't do it.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that the book claims that those typical go-to solutions like willpower, morals, even philosophy, they just aren't enough for long-term recovery.
They're not. They're like temporary bandages on a much deeper wound. The chapter even uses this stark quote. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, so it sets up this almost universal experience of hitting a wall.
Right.
And then introduces this kind of radical concept of finding a power greater than yourself.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. We're talking about people who may not subscribe to traditional religious beliefs, who might even be turned off by the whole idea of a higher power.
Right.
How does the chapter address that?
Well, it actually dives into the experiences of people within the AA fellowship.
Oh, interesting.
Who initially struggled with the concept. They had doubts, they resisted, they even outright rejected it.
I can imagine.
But here's the twist.
Okay.
The chapter emphasizes that you don't need a perfect definition.
Okay.
Or even a full understanding of this power from the get-go.
It's more about just being open to the possibility.
Exactly. It's about that initial shift in perspective.
Right.
That crack in the door that says, maybe there's something more than just me and my willpower.
I like that.
There's this incredibly powerful line in the chapter.
Okay.
As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction.
Wow.
It's like even entertaining the possibility can be a catalyst for change.
Okay, so how does the chapter handle the baggage that many people carry?
Yeah.
The negative experiences with organized religion, specific doctrines, all that.
Right.
Those preconceived notions can be pretty powerful roadblocks.
It tackles them head on.
Really?
The book actually encourages readers to set aside their prejudices against spiritual terms and organized religion.
Okay.
It argues that focusing on the flaws within organized religion, the human imperfections, often blinds people to the potential benefits of faith itself.
So it's like missing the beauty of a forest because you're too focused on a few gnarled trees.
Perfect analogy.
Oh, okay.
And then the chapter gets even more interesting.
Oh, this is good.
It starts talking about faith in a way that might surprise you.
Okay.
It draws a parallel between faith and scientific advancements.
Oh, wow. That's an unexpected connection.
Yeah.
What's the chapter getting at there?
It argues that even in science, we often accept theories without perfect visual proof.
Right.
We're essentially exercising a form of faith.
Oh, I see.
Think about the Wright brothers.
Well, I love that story.
Right.
They were told it was impossible to fly.
Exactly.
Yet they kept going.
They did.
How does that tie in with this idea of faith?
Well, they had this unwavering belief.
Right.
This faith that they could build a machine that could fly.
Right.
Even when prevailing scientific opinion and tons of failed attempts seem to prove otherwise.
So it's not about blindly accepting dogma.
Right.
It's about having the courage to believe in something beyond what's currently considered possible.
Exactly.
I like that a lot.
And that brings us to a pivotal part of the chapter.
Okay.
The use of personal stories as evidence for the effectiveness of this faith in a higher power approach.
So moving from the theoretical to the practical, what kind of stories does it share?
It talks about the shared experience of people in the fellowship who found this power greater than themselves and how that discovery led to profound life changes.
Okay.
It even uses this quote.
Right.
This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life.
Wow.
It's like they finally understood the root cause of their struggles and found a way to break free.
It sounds like the chapter really emphasizes these personal accounts.
It does.
You know, these real-life examples of transformation.
Yeah.
Is there a particular story that stands out?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
The story of the minister's son is a powerful one.
Oh, intriguing.
Yeah.
What's his story?
Well, this man's father was a minister.
Okay.
So he grew up steeped in religion.
Okay.
But his life took a difficult turn.
Right.
He faced business failures, dealt with mental illness in his family, even experienced the tragedy of suicide.
Wow.
All of this led him down a path of deep despair and eventually severe alcoholism.
That's awful.
It's like all the pain and disillusionment turned him into a bitter skeptic.
Oh, wow.
He rejected the very idea of a higher power.
Yeah. Understandable resistance given his background
Right.
and experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a turning point for it?
A dramatic one.
Okay.
He ended up in the hospital completely broken.
Oh, gosh.
Another alcoholic, someone who had found sobriety through spiritual means, tried to talk to him about God.
Okay.
And the minister's son was furious.
Oh, no.
Lashing out with, "If there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me."
Oh, wow.
But later that night, alone in his room, something shifted. He started questioning his own certainty. You know, like, is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong?
Wow.
But as he was grappling with this, he felt like he was living in hell.
Oh, God.
And then this thought hit him like a tidal wave.
Okay.
Who are you to say there is no God?
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
It's like he finally confronted his own ego, his own limited perspective.
Exactly. And the chapter describes it as a complete turning point.
Oh,
He gets out of bed, falls to his knees,
yeah.
and has this profound experience of God's presence.
Wow.
He even describes feeling overwhelmed by a conviction so strong. It was like a great tide at flood.
Wow. So he finds this power greater than himself, and it changes everything what happens to his alcoholism.
It vanishes literally overnight.
Oh, my God.
The book calls it a miracle of healing,
Wow.
and it emphasizes that his story isn't unique.
Oh.
You know, this is a recurring theme in the chapter.
Right.
The power of spiritual experience, regardless of your background or beliefs, to lead to profound change.
So it's not just about intellectual understanding.
Yeah.
It's about having a direct experience of something larger than yourself.
Yes.
It makes me think about the chapter's comparison of faith and science.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the chapter is saying, what if we approached our personal struggles with the same open-mindedness and willingness to experiment that we apply to scientific advancements?
It's a fascinating parallel, right?
Yeah.
We're often so quick to embrace new gadgets or theories in those realms, but when it comes to our own internal world,
Right.
we can be incredibly resistant to change.
It's like clinging to those old patterns.
Yeah.
Even when they clearly aren't working.
Exactly. And the chapter seems to suggest that this resistance,
Right.
the sticking to our guns mentality, can actually be a form of blind faith itself.
Interesting.
Faith in our own limited reasoning and self-sufficiency, almost like a fear of surrendering control.
That's a good point. The chapter does acknowledge that for many, the idea of surrendering to a power greater than themselves can be a huge obstacle. You know, it can feel counterintuitive,
Right.
especially in a culture that values self-reliance and individuality.
Uh-huh.
But the chapter argues that this surrender is the key to unlocking true freedom.
It is. It's like stepping out of the driver's seat and letting someone else take the wheel.
But the question is, how do you do that?
Right.
Where do you even begin?
Well, the chapter highlights the importance of humility.
Okay.
It suggests that we need to let go of our ego's insistence on being in control and allow ourselves to be guided by something larger than ourselves.
That's easier said than done, though, right?
It is.
Especially when you're dealing with something as challenging as addiction.
It can be, but the chapter argues that this act of surrender is not about weakness. It's about tapping into a source of strength.
Right.
That's beyond our individual capacity.
It's like admitting you need help.
Yeah.
Which can be so difficult.
It can.
But also incredibly liberating.
And the stories in the chapter suggest that this leap of faith, this willingness to surrender, can lead to truly remarkable results.
It's interesting, though, you mentioned earlier that the chapter encourages people to set aside their prejudices against spiritual terms.
Yeah.
But how do you reconcile that with the very real harm that organized religion has caused for so many.
Right.
It's hard to just sweep that under the rug.
It is, and the chapter doesn't shy away from that complexity.
Okay.
It doesn't say ignore the bad stuff.
Right.
But it does suggest that focusing solely on those negative aspects can blind us to the potential benefits of faith itself.
Right.
It's like saying, I'm never going into a forest again because I once got stung by a bee.
I see.
You might miss out on something incredibly beautiful and life-giving because of that one negative experience.
Yeah, that's a good point. So how does the chapter suggest we navigate that tension, that balance between acknowledging the harm and still being open to the possibility of something positive?
It emphasizes the importance of personal experience. You know, it points out that while different people may have different conceptions of a higher power, the common thread among those who've found recovery is this direct personal experience. It's not about subscribing to a specific dogma or blindly following someone else's beliefs.
It's about finding your own connection, your own understanding of what this power greater than yourself means to you.
It is. And the book goes as far as to say that the specific conception of this power doesn't really matter.
Okay.
What matters is the willingness to open yourself up to the possibility, however that looks for you.
So the starting point is that simple question.
Yeah.
Am I willing to believe or even entertain the possibility that there's something more?
Precisely. And the chapter assures readers that even the slightest willingness is enough to begin the journey.
So let's say someone's listening to this and thinking, all right, I'm intrigued. I'm open to exploring this, but where do I even begin? How do I connect with this power greater than myself?
Right.
What guidance does the chapter offer?
It circles back to this idea of surrender and humility. But it also talks about the power of simple actions.
Okay.
It encourages readers to take small steps to experiment with practices like prayer or meditation, even if they feel awkward or uncomfortable at first.
It's like dipping your toe in the water before diving in headfirst.
Exactly. And the key is to approach these practices with an open mind.
Right.
And a willingness to see what happens. It's about letting go of expectations.
Okay.
And just being present in the experience.
So it's not about forcing a specific outcome.
Right.
But rather about creating space for something new to emerge.
Yes. And the chapter emphasizes that this process is not always easy.
Right.
It can be messy and challenging. There might be moments of doubt, resistance, even setbacks.
Yeah.
But it encourages readers to persevere, to trust that even in those difficult moments, they are being guided and supported by something larger than themselves.
It's like learning to walk.
Yeah.
You might stumble and fall a few times, but you keep getting back up, and eventually you find your balance. You know, it strikes me that there's a real paradox at play here.
Yeah.
You have to have some degree of faith to even start exploring this idea of faith.
Right.
It's like a catch-22.
It is a bit of a paradox, but you know what's interesting is that the chapter points out how we exercise faith all the time.
Yeah.
Even in seemingly secular areas of life.
I guess so.
We trust our friends, our families, our doctors.
Right.
We have faith in systems like our government or the financial markets, even though we may not fully grasp how they work.
It's true. We rely on all sorts of things without necessarily having concrete proof.
Right.
Understanding.
Yeah.
We board airplanes trusting they'll stay in the air. We cross bridges believing they won't collapse. We depend on this invisible thing called the internet to connect us instantly across the globe.
Exactly. And we rarely question those acts of faith because they've become so woven into the fabric of our lives.
Yeah, it's our.
So the chapter is essentially posing this challenge.
Okay.
If we're willing to extend that kind of faith to so many other aspects of our lives, why are we so hesitant to apply it to the realm of the spiritual?
It's like we're drawing this arbitrary line.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm comfortable having faith in all these practical things, but when it comes to a power greater than myself, that's where I draw the line.
And the chapter encourages us to examine that line.
Okay.
To really question where it comes from and if it's truly serving us. It's not about blindly accepting anything, but rather about being willing to explore, to experiment, to see what happens when we open ourselves up to the possibility of something more.
So it's like conducting a personal experiment. What if just for a while we suspended our disbelief and sincerely considered the idea?
Yeah.
That there might be a power greater than ourselves operating in the universe.
And what's particularly compelling is that the chapter doesn't just present this as a philosophical concept. It grounds it in the real life experiences of people who've walked this path, people who've wrestled with doubt and skepticism and emerged transformed on the other side.
The stories really are the heart of the chapter, aren't they?
They are.
They make this whole idea of faith feel tangible, relatable. You see how it plays out in the lives of real people?
Yeah.
People who started out just like any of us, struggling with the same human challenges.
And they offer a sense of hope, a suggestion that there might be a way out of even the most difficult situations, a path to healing that lies beyond our limited understanding and willpower.
It's an inspiring message, even if it requires us to step outside our comfort zones.
Yeah.
And embrace a certain level of uncertainty. It reminds me of something you mentioned earlier. The idea that embracing this concept of a higher power isn't about abandoning reason or critical thinking.
Absolutely. It's not about turning off our brains or blindly accepting dogma.
Okay.
In fact, the chapter suggests that this kind of faith can actually be more rational than clinging to our own limited perspective.
That's an interesting thought. How so?
Well, consider this. Throughout history, countless individuals have achieved extraordinary things by believing in something that seemed impossible at the time.
Like the Wright brothers and their conviction that they could build a machine that could fly.
Precisely. They had this unshakable faith, this vision that propelled them forward even when faced with countless setbacks and widespread skepticism.
Right. And they weren't alone.
They weren't.
Think of the major scientific breakthroughs, social movements, artistic masterpieces.
Yeah.
They all began with someone daring to believe in something beyond the realm of what was considered possible or acceptable at the time.
So the chapter seems to be suggesting that maybe we limit ourselves by adhering too rigidly to what we can see and prove. With our limited human senses and reasoning, maybe there's a whole world of possibility that opens up when we allow for something greater than ourselves to enter the equation.
It's like we've been living in a self-constructed box.
Yeah.
And this chapter is inviting us to step outside of it, to breathe fresh air, to see the world through a wider lens.
It does feel like a whole new way of looking at things.
It's both exciting and a little daunting, to be honest.
I understand that feeling. It's a big shift in perspective.
Right.
But the chapter assures us that it's a shift that can lead to a more fulfilling, meaningful, and ultimately more joyful life.
It makes me think of that powerful line from the chapter.
Okay.
When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be?
It's a question that goes beyond the scope of alcoholism, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
It challenges us to confront our fundamental beliefs about the nature of reality, our place in the universe, and the very essence of our existence.
It invites us to consider the possibility that there might be a source of power and wisdom, far greater than ourselves, a source that we can tap into, if we're willing to let go of our need for absolute control and certainty.
And ultimately, it leaves us with a choice.
Okay.
Do we continue to cling to our limited human perspective, or do we dare to open ourselves to the possibility of something more?
Right.
A choice that, as the chapter so powerfully illustrates, has the potential to change everything.
Well, that was a deep dive indeed. I hope this exploration has sparked some new insights and perhaps even a sense of curiosity about this idea of a power greater than ourselves. See you next time.